The wind howled across the high plains like a wounded animal, dragging snow and dust together, as if the land itself was undecided whether it was still winter or already spring. And in the middle of that endless, unforgiving wilderness rode Caleb Hart, a solitary cowboy whose life had been shaped by loss, silence, and the kind of hard work that leaves a man with more scars than words, his horse moving carefully through the uneven ground as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised shades of orange and red, a warning of the cold night to come. And Caleb would have passed the narrow ravine without a second glance if not for the sound, a deep, strangled cry that cut through the wind like a blade. Not the sound of an animal exactly, but not quite human either. A sound thick with pain and fury, forcing him to pull his horse to a halt as his hand instinctively moved to the rifle at his side. His heart pounding as years of survival on the frontier told him that sounds like that meant danger, yet something deeper, something stubborn and human, made him turn his horse toward the ravine instead of riding away. And as he dismounted and approached cautiously, boots crunching on frozen earth, he saw her trapped, bleeding, enormous, a woman of the Apache, people caught in a steel bear trap that had snapped shut around her leg, the jagged teeth buried deep into flesh, blood staining the snow beneath her body towering over anything Caleb had ever seen in a woman, tall as a warrior, broad-shouldered, powerful, her dark hair wild around her face, eyes blazing with a mix of pain and defiance that stopped him cold, because this was no helpless victim begging for rescue. This was a giantess brought low by cruelty and iron, and when she saw him, she bared her teeth like a wounded wolf, reaching for a knife even as her leg trembled from blood loss, making it clear she would rather die fighting than be taken. And Caleb raised both hands slowly, his voice low and steady, telling her he meant no harm, that he was only there to help, though he knew she had no reason to believe a lone cowboy wandering Apache land already scarred by broken treaties and graves. And the wind carried his words away as she screamed at him in her tongue, fierce and furious, warning him to stay back. But when she tried to pull herself free, the trap bit deeper, tearing a cry from her chest that echoed off the ravine walls. And in that moment, Caleb saw past her size, past her anger, and recognized the raw truth of suffering that no border or culture could deny. And slowly, painfully aware that one wrong move could end his life, he stepped closer, talking softly, telling her his name, telling her he would open the trap, telling her she could kill him after if she wished. And something in his voice, maybe the weariness, maybe the honesty, made her pause just long enough for him to kneel, his fingers numb as he worked the iron jaws, every second stretching like an eternity as she watched him with burning eyes, muscles coiled, ready to strike, until with a brutal snap the trap released, and she collapsed with a grunt of pain, free but bleeding badly. And before she could raise her knife again, Caleb tore strips from his coat, pressing them against her wound, ignoring her growls, ignoring the way she shoved at him weakly, until the bleeding slowed, and exhaustion finally dragged her to her knees. And the giant Apache woman looked at him then, not as an enemy, not as prey, but as something far more dangerous to a man like Caleb Hart, a debt unpaid. And he helped her to her feet, supported her weight despite the strain on his own battered body, guiding her toward his horse, knowing full well that helping her meant stepping into a world of consequences he could not yet imagine. And as night fell and stars burned cold above them, he built a fire, treated her wound as best he could, and sat across from her in silence, the crackling flames throwing shadows across her face as she studied him with eyes that missed nothing. And when dawn finally came, she rose without a word, tested her injured leg, then turned to him and spoke his name, carefully pronounced before disappearing into the land like a living myth, leaving Caleb alone, with the fire's ashes and the uneasy feeling that his life had just crossed a line it could never uncross. And he was right, because the next morning, as he rode back toward his ranch, a thunder of hooves surrounded him without warning, Apache warriors emerging from the hills like spirits of the earth itself. Arrows nocked, rifles aimed, and at their center rode a man older than the land seemed to be, his posture straight, his presence commanding, his eyes sharp with authority and judgment. The Apache chief himself, who looked down at Caleb not with hatred but with calculation, and spoke words that froze the blood in Caleb's veins even more than the winter wind ever could. Words that would bind his fate forever, because the woman he had saved was not just a warrior, not just a daughter of the tribe, but the chief's daughter, and by Apache law, by honor older than any map or fence. A man who saved her life had earned a choice that was no choice at all. And as the chief dismounted and stepped forward, his voice calm but absolute, the message was clear. Caleb Hart would marry his daughter, or face consequences far worse than death. And as the warriors closed in, the future stretching before him like an unbroken storm, Caleb realized that one act of mercy had turned into a destiny that would change not only his life, but the fate of two worlds colliding. And if you want to know how courage, love, and sacrifice reshape a man when survival alone is no longer enough, then stay with this story and don't forget to subscribe. Because what comes next will test loyalty, tradition, and the very meaning of honor itself.